everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Diddy Diaries. In this episode, we're going to continue our journey through the Diddy court documents, and this time we're going to be taking a look at the affirmation in opposition to defendant's appeal of an order denying pretrial release. Docket number 24-2606, United States of America versus Sean Combs. Christy Slavic, pursuant to Title 28, United States Code, Section 1746, hereby declares under penalty of perjury. 1. I am an Assistant United States Attorney in the Office of Damian Williams, United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and I represent the United States of America in this matter. I submit this affirmation in opposition to defendant appellant Sean Combs' appeal from the District Court's order denying pretrial release. 2. Preliminary statement. Combs appeals from an order denying him pretrial release that was entered in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York on September 18th, 2024 by the Honorable Andrew L. Carter, United States District Judge A. 226. 3. Indictment 24 CR.542 was filed on September 12, 2024, charging Combs in 3 counts. 1. Racketeering conspiracy in violation of U.S. Code 18, Section 1962D. 2. Sex trafficking in violation of U.S. Code 18, Section 1591 and 2. And 3. Interstate transportation to engage in prostitution in violation of U.S. Code 18, Section 2421 A and 2. Number 4. Combs was arrested on September 16, 2024, and was presented and arraigned the following day by Honorable Robin Tarnofsky, United States Magistrate Judge. Following the arraignment, Judge Tarnofsky denied Combs bail after a hearing. 5. Combs appealed Judge Tarnofsky's decision to Judge Carter, to whom the case was assigned at that time. The parties appeared before Judge Carter on September 18, 2024, and after another bail hearing, Judge Carter denied Combs bail. Combs timely appealed. 6. Combs' trial is scheduled for May 5, 2024, before the Honorable Aaron Subramanian, to whom the case was reassigned on October 3, 2024. The statement of facts, the offense conduct, and evidence. 7. The indictment charges Combs with participating in a racketeering conspiracy since at least 2008. As alleged, Combs and other members and associates of the racketeering enterprise, wielded the power and prestige of Combs' reputation in the entertainment industry to commit federal crimes, including racketeering, sex trafficking, and other offenses, including crimes of violence. From at least 2009 through 2024, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause female victims to engage in sexual activity, which included sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as freak-offs. Freak-offs, which sometimes lasted days, were elaborate sex performances that Combs directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. Combs ensured that female victims participated in freak-offs through coercion and violence, including by supplying female victims with controlled substances, subjecting female victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse, controlling female victims' careers, livelihoods, and housing, and threatening to disseminate recordings of freak-offs. In addition, as charged in the indictment, Combs engaged in other acts of violence, often assisted by members and associates of the enterprise, including kidnapping, arson, and physical violence. Throughout the charged racketeering conspiracy, Combs threw people to the ground and hit, dragged, and choked others. As the government explained below, the allegations in the indictment are supported by detailed and credible testimony of dozens of victims of and witnesses to Combs' physical and sexual abuse, as well as extensive documentary and electronic evidence. This includes financial and billing records, travel records, electronic media, e.g. videos, photos, and audio files, and voluminous communications, including communications by and with Combs. It also includes evidence seized after executing multiple search warrants for cloud accounts, electronic devices, and Combs' person and premises, which yielded cell phones, laptops, cloud storage accounts, as well as physical evidence, such as freak-off supplies, firearms, and ammunition. B. The initial bail hearing. Following Combs' arraignment, the government moved for Combs' detention under multiple provisions of the Bail Reform Act, 1 U.S. Code 18, Section 3142, F1A, because Combs was charged with sex trafficking, 2 U.S. Code 18, Section 3142, F1B, because Count 2 carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment, and 3 U.S. Code 18, Section 3142, F2A and B, because Combs is a serious risk of flight, and there is a serious risk that Combs will obstruct justice, or threaten, injure, or intimidate a prospective witness, or juror, or attempt to do so. Because Combs was charged with sex trafficking, detention was presumed. See U.S. Code 18, Section 3142, E3D. The government argued before Judge Tarnofsky that Combs posed a danger to the community and a risk of flight. The government provided an overview of the conduct charged in the indictment that demonstrated Combs' dangerousness, including Combs' decades-long pattern of physical and sexual abuse of victims, as well as other violent acts perpetrated by Combs and members of the enterprise. The government also highlighted Combs' obstructive conduct charged in the indictment, including bribery and witness tampering. The government highlighted an incident that took place in March of 2016 during a freak-off at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, California. During that incident, Combs violently assaulted a female victim in the public elevator bank as she attempted to leave the hotel. Combs punched the victim, threw her to the ground, kicked her, attempted to drag her back to the hotel room, and then threw a vase at her. This violent incident was captured on hotel surveillance footage, which was publicly released by the media earlier this year. When hotel security staff intervened, Combs attempted to bribe the security officer, offering him a stack of cash in exchange for his silence. When the security officer refused Combs' bribe, Combs directed his staff to contact other members of the hotel security staff to obtain the surveillance video and to reach out to the victim to ensure that she would not report Combs' assault. Within days of the incident, as a result of Combs' bribery efforts, video surveillance of the incident disappeared from the hotel server. Combs continued his obstruction well into 2024 after a civil lawsuit was filed against Combs in November 2023, detailing, among other allegations, the March 2016 intercontinental assault. Combs, personally and through his attorney, denied assaulting the victim. After the video of the March 2016 incident was obtained and published by a media outlet in 2024, however, Combs was forced to admit that he had, in fact, engaged in the assault that he had described as baseless and outrageous lies only months before. The government also described evidence of multiple additional assaults by Combs against victims, including choking, hitting, kicking, and dragging victims, often by their hair. These assaults caused significant injuries to victims, which often required long periods of recovery. The government detailed multiple incidents in which Combs, or people acting on Combs' behalf, reached out to potential victims and witnesses, including witnesses who had received grand jury subpoenas. The government described Combs' attempt in November of 2023 to feed a potential victim a false narrative in exchange for Combs' continued financial support. As the government also proffered, after another civil lawsuit which detailed violent incidents during the period of the charged racketeering conspiracy was filed on September 10, 2024, Combs was in contact with a potential witness to the lawsuit's allegations 128 times between September 10, 2024 and September 14, 2024. On September 13, 2024, the witness made a public statement denying that she had witnessed the abuse described in the civil lawsuit. Combs' counsel focused primarily on the measures taken prior to Combs' arrest to address his risk of flight. Counsel also argued that on March 2016, assault was about infidelity and not sex trafficking, and that Combs' subsequent actions were about avoiding being seen in a towel hitting a girlfriend. Combs' counsel likewise sought to minimize the other examples of Combs' obstructive conduct. Combs' counsel also asserted that all parties in the freak-offs participated consensually. After a hearing argument, Judge Tarnofsky found that Combs had not rebutted the presumption in favor of detention, and that there was no condition that would reasonably assure Combs' appearance or the safety of the community. Judge Tarnofsky emphasized the serious nature and circumstances of the charged conduct, which largely happened behind closed doors and was therefore difficult to monitor. Judge Tarnofsky noted indications in Combs' history and characteristics that he would present a danger to the community, and dismissed as inadequate the exhortations from Combs' counsel to trust him and his client, given Combs' drug abuse and anger issues. Judge Tarnofsky highlighted that the weight of the evidence was significant, given the multiple witnesses observed firsthand Combs' violence and his coercion. The bail hearing before Judge Carter. Combs appealed Judge Tarnofsky's decision to Judge Carter, and the bail hearing before Judge Carter proceeded on September 18, 2024, in advance of which parties filed additional written submissions. At the outset, Judge Carter made clear that he had reviewed the extensive record created to date, including the written submissions to him and to Judge Tarnofsky and the transcript from the prior bail hearing. Judge Carter indicated that his lesser concern was risk of flight, but noted that the package that's been submitted by Mr. Combs does not give the court a reasonable assurance that he would return to court given his wealth. Judge Carter's bigger concern, however, deals with the danger of obstruction of justice and the danger of witness tampering. The government focused on the conduct with which Combs was charged, which showed his dangerousness, his resources, and his willingness to lie and obstruct. The government then walked through the seriousness of the offenses, which reflects both the defendant's dangerousness and the risks of obstruction if released. The government described the freak-off activity, which occurred for over a decade, and as recently as 2024, during which Combs supplied female victims with illegal drugs and used violence to coerce sexual activity. And the government described Combs' attempts to blackmail victims, including by threatening to release recordings he made of freak-offs. The government also highlighted the acts of violence, witnessed by dozens, perpetrated by Combs against multiple victims, as well as the fact that Combs hid defaced semi-automatic weapons in his bedroom closet. All right, we're going to wrap up right here, and then the next episode we'll pick up with this declaration. All of the information that goes with this episode can be found in the description box. What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Diddy Diaries. In this episode, we're picking up where we left off with the Christy Slavic affirmation in opposition to defendant's appeal of an order denying pretrial release. With respect to the March 2016 incident at the Intercontinental Hotel, the government rebutted Combs' argument that the incident did not happen in the context of a freak-off and that his attempted bribery was not obstructive. Based on multiple sources of evidence, the government proffered that immediately prior to Combs' assault of the victim, there was a male commercial sex worker in the hotel room with Combs and the victim, who remained inside the hotel room during the assault. The government then read text messages between Combs and the victim, which confirmed the victim's severe injuries. The government highlighted text messages sent by Combs himself immediately after the assault, suggesting that Combs feared a law enforcement response, including the following: "Call me, the cops are here," and "Yo, please call, I'm surrounded." The government emphasized that whatever the context, the undisputed conduct captured on video, punching, kicking, and dragging the victim, underscored Combs' dangerousness. The government detailed additional examples of Combs' obstructive conduct, directly contacting a victim following the November 2023 civil lawsuit that accused Combs of sex trafficking, repeatedly contacting witnesses to charge conduct directly and through intermediaries, and contacting witnesses who received grand jury subpoenas, including as recently as July of 2024. The government provided additional information about the obstructive calls described to Judge Tarnofsky. After the civil lawsuit was filed against Combs in November of 2023, another potential victim texted Combs about her own sexual trauma. Combs then called her and recorded the calls on an employee's phone. During those calls, Combs told the victim repeatedly not to text him and that he was not supposed to be using the phone. Combs also attempted to convince the victim that she had willingly engaged in sex acts with him, but she pushed back, telling him that she felt manipulated. Combs told the victim that if she continued to support him, she would not have anything to worry about, referring to the financial support that Combs provided the victim. Combs then texted an employee to ensure that Combs' financial advisor would not do anything dumb, like failing to pay the victim's rent on time. Combs' counsel advocated for bail under certain proposed conditions, including restricted communication with third parties and monitoring by a private security firm. Judge Carter engaged in an extended back and forth with defense counsel, expressing skepticism about the proposed bail conditions. With respect to March 2016 incident at the Intercontinental Hotel, Combs' counsel characterized the relationship between the victim and Combs as very loving, and freak-offs a sought-after special part of their relationship. Judge Carter responded, "What does this have to do with him punching her, throwing a vase at her, and kicking her? What's love got to do with that?" Combs' counsel continued to argue that there was no sex trafficking, but Judge Carter pressed him to respond to the argument that Combs' violent conduct was relevant to Combs' dangerousness more generally. Combs' counsel conceded, "I think it's relevant. I think it is relevant. I haven't said it wasn't relevant. I'm saying it's not part of the sex trafficking." Combs' counsel nonetheless urged Judge Carter that even if the court doesn't fully trust Combs, trust the bail package as a whole. Judge Carter denied Combs bail based on clear and convincing evidence that Combs is a danger regarding obstruction of justice and witness tampering, and that Combs is a danger to the safety of others in the community more generally. Judge Carter also found that there was no set of conditions that would reasonably assure the safety of the community or that Combs would not obstruct justice or tamper with a witness. Judge Carter did not reach the question of risk of flight, but made clear that he did not view the proposed bail package as sufficient to assure Combs' future appearances. He also found the proposed bail package insufficient with respect to obstruction, given that Combs would still have access to employees and other individuals, and that Combs could obstruct justice and intimidate witnesses through these third parties, including with coded messages, if necessary. The argument. The district court properly denied Combs' motion for bail. Judge Carter properly denied Combs' motion for bail, just as Judge Tarnofsky did before him. Combs cannot demonstrate that Judge Carter clearly erred when he found, after considering lengthy written submissions, reviewing a transcript of the bail hearing before Judge Tarnofsky, and presiding over extended oral argument, that the government had established by clear and convincing evidence that Combs posed a danger to the community and that no bail conditions could reasonably assure the safety of the community. A. Applicable law. If a judicial officer concludes after a hearing that no condition or a combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required in the safety of any other person in the community, such judicial officer shall order the detention of the person before trial. U.S. Code 18, Section 3142E. In seeking pretrial detention, the government bears the burden of showing by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant poses a risk of flight, or by clear and convincing evidence that the defendant poses a danger to the community and that no condition or combination of conditions can sufficiently address those risks. Additionally, pretrial detention on the grounds of obstruction or witness tampering is appropriate when the government can establish by clear and convincing evidence that there exists a serious risk that the defendant would threaten, injure, or intimidate a prospective witness or juror, where, as here, the defendant is charged with certain offenses, including sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. There is a statutory presumption that no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required and the safety of the community. In such a case, the defendant bears a limited burden of production, not a burden of persuasion, to rebut that presumption by coming forward with evidence that he does not pose a danger to the community or a risk of flight. Even where a defendant produces sufficient evidence to rebut the statutory presumption of detention, the presumption does not disappear. Instead, it becomes a factor to be weighed and considered like all others in deciding whether to release the defendant. In determining bail, the court must consider several factors, including the nature and circumstances of the offense charged, including whether the offense is in violation of Section 1591, the weight of the evidence against the person, the history and characteristics of the person, including the person's criminal history, the nature and seriousness of the danger to any person or the community that would be posed by the person's release. The court applies deferential review to a district court's order of detention. This district court's findings as to the accused risks of flight and potential danger to the community for clear error. United States versus English 629, F.3D 311, 319, Second Circuit, 2011. On appeal, this court will reverse only if on the entire evidence it's left with the definite and firm conviction that a mistake has been committed. B. The discussion. Judge Carter's dangerousness finding was supported by clear and convincing evidence. The record amply supported Judge Carter's finding that Combs is a danger to the community. In arguing that Judge Carter erred, Combs entirely ignores the seriousness and violent nature of the charges against him and the strength of the evidence against him. As alleged since at least 2008, Combs has engaged in serious acts of violence, including forcing and coercing women to participate in sex acts with commercial sex workers by using physical force, financial pressure, emotional abuse, and narcotics. On multiple occasions, Combs assaulted others by throwing objects at them, choking them, pushing them, kicking them, and slamming them against walls and onto the ground. Combs and other members and associates of the enterprise also engaged in kidnapping and arson and carried firearms to intimidate and threaten others. Although Combs claims on appeal, as he did below, that the freak-offs involved adults voluntarily engaged in consensual sex, the grand jury found probable cause otherwise, and the district court properly credited the allegations in the indictment and the government's detailed evidentiary proffers. See LaFontaine 210, F.3D at 131. Moreover, undisputed video evidence corroborated that Combs used brutal violence against his victims, including hitting, punching, kicking, and dragging them. Even if the evidence did not support the conclusion that Combs' assault at the Intercontinental Hotel was related to sex trafficking, which it did, Combs' counsel conceded that Combs' violent conduct against women was nonetheless relevant to his dangerousness. As Judge Carter recognized, Combs' claims that he was in a decade-long consensual relationship with victim 1 does not get Combs very far. A willingness to strike loved ones offers probative evidence of a tendency to violence and dangerousness towards others. See Mercedes 254 F.3D at 437. Reversing grant of pretrial release to defendant with a history of domestic violence charged with violent offenses. As Judge Carter found, the government also established a serious risk of obstruction and witness tampering by clear and convincing evidence. In arguing that evidence of obstruction was thin and that the government provided no basis to believe that Combs tampered with witnesses, Combs primarily quibbles with the strength of the government's evidence that Combs made inappropriate contact with government witnesses. But Combs ignores altogether the serious and substantial allegations of obstruction, bribery, and witness tampering charged in the indictment as part of Combs' pattern of racketeering activity that amply supported Judge Carter's determination. A-010, A-005, describing one purpose of the enterprise as protecting Combs from detection and prosecution by law enforcement authorities through acts of intimidation, manipulation, bribery, and threats or retaliation against witnesses to Combs' crimes. A-007, describing Combs' use of explicit videos as collateral to ensure the continued obedience and silence of his victims. A-008 and A-009, Combs and his associates pressured witnesses and victims, including through bribery, to stay silent and not report what they experienced to law enforcement, and provided these victims and witnesses with a false narrative of events in an effort to conceal Combs' crimes. Combs' long-standing and sophisticated methods of obstructing justice and silencing witnesses more than established his dangerousness. See United States v. Kelly 20-1720, 2020, WL 7019289 at 2. Second Circuit, September 8th, 2020. Affirming district court's denial of bail when defendant was charged with serious crimes spanning years, including obstruction and witness tampering. All right, we're going to wrap up right here, and in the next episode, we're going to finish this bad boy off. All of the information that goes with this episode can be found in the description box. What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Diddy Diaries. In this episode, we're getting right back to the affirmation in opposition to defendant's appeal of an order denying pretrial release, and this is a declaration by Christy Slavic. While Combs offered competing explanations for Combs' assault at the Intercontinental Hotel, his bribery of hotel security staff, and his contact with witnesses after the civil lawsuits and grand jury subpoenas, the district court reasonably rejected these efforts to explain away one of the most devastating pieces of physical evidence in Combs' long-running obstructive conduct. Where there are two permissible views of the evidence, the fact finder choice between them cannot be clearly erroneous. Anderson versus Bessemer City, 470 U.S. 564, 574, 1985. And here, Combs' explanations were simply implausible. The facts, including Combs' text messages that the cops are here, supported the inference that Combs wanted to destroy the hotel surveillance video to avoid prosecution for a vicious assault. And while Combs argues that witness contacts were minimally relevant or entirely innocuous because they concern civil suits, the suits alleged years of physical abuse and sexual abuse, including sex trafficking, allegations that Combs was plainly aware could subject him to criminal investigation and prosecution. Moreover, as the government made clear, Combs continued to contact witnesses, including witnesses who have received grand jury subpoenas, into the summer of 2024 when he undoubtedly knew about the government's criminal investigation. Regardless, attempting to feed a witness a false narrative so that they adopt it as their own is witness tampering. See LaFontaine 210 F.3d at 128. In Gotti, we held that a single incident of witness tampering was sufficient to revoke bail. United States versus Milan 4 F.3d 1038 1048 Second Circuit 1993. District Court not required to identify a particular trial witness that might be the object of influence or intimidation, where credible testimony presented that the defendant attempted to tamper with witnesses. And the defendant's obstructive conduct in a separate proceeding may support pretrial detention, as all bail decision rests on predictions of defendant's future behavior, and such conduct may shed considerable light on his motive, capacity, and propensity to commit certain acts if free on bail. United States vs. Gotti 794 F.2d 773 779 Second Circuit 1986. Judge Carter did not clearly err by rejecting Combs' proposed conditions. Combs argues that Judge Carter erroneously rejected Combs' proposed bail package, which was plainly sufficient to address any obstruction concerns. But Judge Carter did not clearly err in deciding that the proposed conditions, including a private security firm, would not sufficiently eliminate the risks of obstruction and danger to the community. The government established that Combs used methodical and sophisticated means to silence and intimidate witnesses throughout the racketeering conspiracy and during the government's investigation. Combs often used loyal intermediaries to accomplish his objectives and wielded violence and blackmail, as well as his substantial wealth and influence relative to his victims and employees to achieve compliance. Judge Carter, therefore, rightly concluded that the proposed conditions were inadequate because they would still permit Combs to obstruct justice and intimidate witnesses through employees and other individuals and even coded messages. Combs baldly asserts that there was not a shred of evidence that Combs used coded messages. As only one example, however, Combs tried to ensure a victim's silence about her sexual trauma by telling her that he needed her and that if she needed Combs too, she ain't got to worry about nothing else, alluding to a promise of financial security in exchange for loyalty. While Combs asserts that this incident did not involve an intermediary, Combs then texted an employee to ensure that his financial advisor kept paying the victim's rent. The evidence, therefore, supported the conclusion that even if confined to his home, Combs has the means and the influence to evade even seemingly restrictive bail conditions. The district court rightly rejected Combs' effort to pay his way out of detention when the record established that no set of conditions could ensure the safety of the community. This court has expressly held that Bail Reform Act does not permit a two-tiered bail system in which defendants of lesser means are detained pending trial while wealthy defendants are released to self-funded private jails. United States v. Bustani 932F.3D 7982, Second Circuit, 2019. See also United States v. Banky 369, F.APPX 152, 153, and 54, Second Circuit, 2010. This court is troubled by the possibility of allowing wealthy defendants to buy their way out by constructing a private jail. And Combs' efforts to characterize private security as foolproof is incompatible with the court's recognition that private jail proposals, at best, elaborately replicate detention facility without the confidence of security such as facility instills. United States v. Orena, 986 F.2D 628, 632, Second Circuit, 1993. Combs relies on Sabhani, 493 F.3D at 75, which endorsed release involving a private security condition with the government's approval. But, as this court has since explained, Sabhani involved a case where the defendant was detained on risk of flight, not dangerousness. And, but for his wealth, he would not have been detained. Bustani, 932 F.3D at 82. Bustani distinguished circumstances like those here, where courts should not be granting bail to defendants because of their wealth, when similarly situated defendants of lesser means would be detained. See also Rodriguez, 950 F.2D at 89. A bail package that may reasonably assure the appearance of defendant at trial will not necessarily assure the safety of the community. Judge Carter did not commit legal error. Given the thorough proceedings below, the court should swiftly reject Combs' argument that Judge Carter committed legal error by failing to make factual findings or to weigh required factors. While the Bail Reform Act includes a provision requiring written findings of fact and a written statement of the reasons for detention, U.S. Code 18, Section 3142, I and 1. This court has explained that, whereas here the court's findings and reasons for issuing a detention order are clearly set out in the written transcript of the hearing, the requirement of a writing is satisfied. English 629 F.3D at 321. At the end of the hearing, Judge Carter denied bail only after reiterating, "I've heard from the parties and I've reviewed everything," which included written submissions from the parties and the transcript of Judge Tarnowski's bail hearing. As memorialized in the transcript, Judge Carter then specifically found that Combs posed a danger to the community and a risk of obstruction based on the evidence put before him. This is therefore not a case where the detention order contained only implicit findings or no finding whatsoever. Motion 24, quoting United States v. Friedman, 837 F.2D 48 and 49, and 50, Second Circuit, 1988. This court may affirm on risk of flight grounds. Even though not reached by Judge Carter, the court may also affirm on the basis that Combs presents a risk of flight based on the significant penalties he faces, the serious reputational harm that may result from trial, and Combs' substantial resources. United States v. Kramer, 777 F.3D, 597, 603, Second Circuit, 2015. This court can affirm a decision on any grounds reported in the record, even if it's not one which the trial court relied. See A-025 through 027, A-111 through 112, and A-133 through 134. Conclusion. Judge Carter's order denying Combs' pretrial release should be affirmed. This was signed by Chrissy Slavic, and it was dated October 16th, 2024. All right, so that's going to do it for the declaration from Christy Slavic, but there's a whole lot more to get to. Considering that the whole appeals docket has been updated, we have plenty of court documents to dive into and get added to the catalog. And considering that a gag order is imminent, this is going to be the way forward, because these court documents are going to continue to give us an idea about what's happening behind the scenes. Because all this stuff we're hearing now from these sources, anonymous or otherwise, that's going to dry up. Nobody's going to want to risk their life or their career when it comes to going against the gag order. So you're not going to be hearing from official sources for the most part. And the only way to go about things once we get there is to go through these court documents and go through each and every one of them. So that's exactly what we're going to continue to do for the duration. That way we have all the context that's needed, we have all the meat on the bone, and when we sit down to eat, we have a nice filling meal, right? I'm not trying to get part of the story. I don't just want one course. I want a full-on meal. So we're going to continue to add this context, and we'll continue to add these court documents as they become available. All of the information that goes with this episode can be found in the description box.